When I checked my son's laundry, I found a woman's earrings in his pocket. I asked him, "Whose is this?" He froze and whispered, "Mom, don't tell my wife." What I found out shattered my heart. My name is Karen Mitchell. I am 48, a single mom, and I live in a small town in Ohio. I have one son named Jake. He is 26. He has a wife, Emily, who is 25. I work at the library. I like quiet shelves and cups of tea. I like small, honest things, a clean kitchen, a warm loaf of bread, and the sound of my son laughing. When I checked my son's laundry, I found a woman's earring in his pocket. I asked him, "Whose is this?" He froze and whispered, "Mom, don't tell my wife." I stood very still. The shirt I held in my hands felt suddenly heavy, like it had swallowed the light in the room. Jake looked at me with eyes I hardly recognized. His voice was small, and there was shame in it. My heart beat loud behind my ribs. For one long second, the house was very quiet. The clock on the wall ticked like a judge. I will not lie, that moment broke something in me. But it did not break me all the way. I have learned that a person can crack and still stand. My mother taught me that. She used to say, "Kindness does not mean you are weak. It means you are brave enough to care even when it hurts." I held on to that sentence like a lifeline. Before that heavy shirt and the earring, life had been ordinary. Jake grew like a good seed. He played soccer as a boy and watched cartoons with sticky fingers. He kissed my cheek when he left for college, and he called me every Sunday. When he brought Emily home after they met at a coffee shop, I liked her. Emily had a warm laugh and a way of folding her hands that looked honest. They married in a small ceremony under the elm tree in our backyard. I cried then, but they said, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of each other." I wanted to believe them. The days after the wedding felt soft. Jake and Emily stayed in our old house for a while before they moved into an apartment. We cooked dinners together and shared late-night talks. I watched Jake fall deeper in love. He would show me little things, a new favorite song, a photo of Emily with flour on her nose. The house smelled like bread, like safety. I thought that was enough. Slowly, small things shifted. At first it was nothing. A text left on the table that Jake deleted. A laugh that stopped when I entered the room. Emily's eyes, once warm, would go cold for a second and then smile like nothing happened. I told myself to mind my own business. Mothers watch and wait. We hope. We trust. We tell ourselves stories to keep the quiet. One morning, months after their wedding, I agreed to help with laundry. Emily had called and said she was sick. She sounded tired, and Jake asked, "Mom, can you help?" "I have a meeting." I said yes, because that's what I do, I help. I went to their apartment with a basket of detergent and a kind, small smile. The apartment was neat. There was a plant by the window and a mug with a chipped edge on the counter. I sorted colors and whites like a robot that remembers old rules. I folded Jake's shirts the way he liked, sleeves tucked, collar straight. It felt ordinary. It felt safe. Then I saw the earring. It was a small, gold hoop with a tiny star hanging from it. It sparkled in the light like a small sun. It should not have been in Jake's pocket. It belonged to someone else. The sight of it felt like a flicker in a calm sky, a small sign that a storm had come. I called Jake into the living room. He came in wiping his hands on a towel, hair sticking to his forehead from the meeting he had almost missed. He was his usual tall, easy self. He smiled at me, and I almost smiled back, but the earring sat heavy in my palm like a secret. "Whose is this?" I asked simply. I had hoped, maybe foolishly, that it would be a mistake. Maybe Emily had dropped it and Jake had found it. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor. Maybe it was nothing. But Jake froze. His face changed. He looked smaller, like the light in him had been turned down. The room tightened around us. For a heartbeat, he did not speak. Then he whispered, and the words were like knives wrapped in silk. "Mom, don't tell my wife." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Not because he asked, but because of the shame behind them. I felt betrayed like a cold wind. I felt my chest ache in a way I had not known was possible. 1,000 questions crowded my mind, but they had no voice. Instead, I remembered to breathe. 1 breath. 2. My mother's voice came back to me, steady as an anchor. I did not answer him then. I put the earring in a small napkin and folded it carefully. We stood like that for a long time. The silence said more than any confession could. I wanted to demand the truth. I wanted to storm into Emily's room and find answers. I wanted to shout. Instead, I sat down and looked at my son. "Jake," I said softly, "you have to tell me what this means." He looked at the floor. He looked like a boy again, not the husband I had watched marry the woman we all liked. His eyes were wet. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I didn't mean for, it just happened." "How long?" I asked. He swallowed. "A few months." "A few months," I repeated. The words tasted like iron. A few months. The word made a small world full of lies. Then he told me a story that made my knees weak. He said he had been lonely some nights when Emily worked late. He said someone from work, a woman named Claire, started texting him at odd hours. It started with coffee and over time became more. He told me about small meetings that turned into long talks. He said he did not plan to fall. He said he felt guilty and torn. He said he loved Emily but felt something missing. He said everything at once like a man trying to mend a glass with his bare hands. As he spoke, my anger rose and fell like the tide. First, I was furious at Claire for tempting, then at Jake for giving in, then at Emily for being kind and blind and trusting. I felt like the world had tilted. But under the fury, something else lived, a soft pain for my son, who was stumbling through a mistake that could break his life. I sat there in the apartment, listening to the truth come out in pieces. I did not say much. I remembered my mother's words, "Kindness is brave." So I listened. I folded my hands in my lap like a woman who knows how to carry secrets without dropping them. After Jake left for his meeting, I sat alone in the living room. The earring lay in the napkin on the coffee table like a tiny moon. I thought about Emily in another room, sleeping maybe, or on the couch with a fever. Her hair fanned around her like a safe halo. I thought about how we treat each other when we are tired. I thought about kindness and betrayal and how they are sometimes the same small rope tied in different knots. There are moments in life when you must choose what kind of person you will be. You can press a wound until it hurts and becomes infected, or you can clean it, nurse it, and decide carefully. I decided that I would not act like a judge. I would act like a mother who loved both her son and his wife. But I also knew I could not leave the earring where it might cause more harm. I made a plan. Not revenge, no. Not yet. When a person hurts you, sometimes the best revenge is to be wise. My plan was to uncover the truth slowly and gently. I would ask questions. I would watch. I would collect small truths, like stamps in a book, until I knew enough. I wanted to protect Emily from pain if I could, and I wanted to help Jake find his way back to himself. The next days were small and careful. I visited more often under small reasons, to return a book, to bring soup, to check on Emily's cold. I saw how Emily smiled and how Jake avoided eye contact sometimes. I saw text messages slip across screens when no one was looking. I learned to hide my worry behind tea and a soft voice. I learned the art of patience. But secrets, like seeds buried in soil, will sprout. You can water them with silence or let them choke the garden. One afternoon, a week after the earring, I found something else. It was not big, a receipt left on the kitchen counter. It was for a hotel 2 towns over, dated 3 nights ago. My hands shook when I picked it up. The ink felt aggressive and real. The numbers on the paper were cold. I tucked the receipt into my pocket like a small ember. I waited until night, when the house was quiet. Then I stood at the doorway of their bedroom and watched the light under Emily's door. I thought of asking Jake to tell me everything at once, but I remembered courage and kindness. I remembered that people make mistakes, and sometimes the right thing is to hold them true, even while they fall. That night, I slept poorly. My mind spun with images and questions. I woke early and made pancakes because my mother used to say, "A warm plate can mend a small heartbreak." I brought them over and knocked on the door. Emily opened the door in slippers, hair messy, eyes pink from rest. She smiled when she saw me and hugged me like she trusted me already. I wanted to tell her everything, to rip the bandage off quick, but I did not. I handed her the pancakes and cleaned the crumbs like a woman mending what she could. We sat at the table and chattered about small things, the neighbor's cat, the library's new books. I watched Emily as she sipped coffee, soft and unsuspecting. Every laugh she gave sounded like a bell I wanted to keep ringing. I loved her for being kind. I loved her for being human. Later that day, an extreme thing happened. I had been looking through Jake's jacket to find an old pen he had left when a car door slammed outside. I went to the window and saw Claire, the woman Jake had spoken of, standing across the street with a man I did not know. She looked fierce. She looked angry. The unusual thing was not her presence, but the way she lifted her phone and pointed it toward our house. For a moment, it felt like an army of small storms had gathered over our street. My heart pounded. I had been treading softly, collecting tiny truths. This was not a small truth. This was a wave. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face like a warning. Claire caught my eye and smiled with teeth that did not reach her eyes. She raised her hand like a queen and then walked away. As she left, the man with her glanced over his shoulder and said something I could not hear. The sight of them together felt like a promise of trouble. I shut the door and locked it like a child hiding from thunder. Inside, the earring and the receipt and the memory of Jake's whisper lived like small matches waiting to be struck. I felt something change in me. The kind, patient woman I had been was still there, but now a careful, fierce part of me had woken. The storm was coming closer. I could hear its first thunder. I sat down at the table, placed the napkin with the earring in front of me, and looked at the phone receipt again. My hands did not tremble anymore. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. Then I took a breath and whispered to myself the words my mother taught me: be kind, be brave, be wise. The house was quiet. Outside, somewhere down the street, a car door closed. The next event would not be small. The first chapter of the story must end here, with the sky darkening and choices heavy in the air. I knew that when secrets grow, they either bloom into truth or rot into pain. I chose to seek the truth, but I also knew that finding it would bring an extreme moment I could not ignore. That extreme moment was about to arrive. The knock at the door came hard and sudden, like a hammer. The knock was loud, sharp, and full of hurry. It woke the whole house. My heart jumped into my throat. I was still holding the napkin with the earring, like it was a hot coal. For a moment, I could not move. Then I went to the door slowly, because slow is how you meet storms, not running, not screaming, just steady. I opened the door and found Claire standing there. Her hair was tied back tight, like she had somewhere to be and no time for small talk. Her face looked hard. Behind her, I could see the man from the other day. His jacket was dark and his hands in his pockets. He did not smile. He looked like someone who wanted to be taken seriously. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Claire said. Her voice was flat. She did not say Karen like a friend. She said Mrs. Mitchell like a person reading a name off a list. That small distance felt like a wall. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice was small, but my feet felt steady. When you have been carrying a secret like a stone in your pocket, you learn to stand firm. Claire did not answer at once. She looked past me into the living room. Her eyes fell on the coffee table and the napkin with the earring. For a second, her face changed, not soft, not guilty, just surprised, like she had found a missing part of some plan. "I need to talk to you about Jake," she said finally. Alone. Her words were a blade. I had expected anger, or tears, or a demand. I had not expected her to come to my house and say she wanted to talk alone. For a moment, I thought of closing the door. For a moment, I thought of calling Jake. But my mother taught me to listen before I judge. So I stepped aside. We sat at my kitchen table. The afternoon light fell in a tired stripe across the floor. Claire placed her bag on the chair like she had come from work. The man stood in the doorway like a ghost, watching but not stepping in. She told me a story. It was not a long story. It was sharp like glass. She said she worked in the same office as Jake. She said she had met him on a project. She said they had lunch sometimes and talked about books. She said it began with small messages, jokes about the printer, a meme, a comment about the weather. Then the messages began at night. She told me she felt alone and that Jake made her feel seen. She looked at me carefully, as if testing how I would react. I didn't want to hurt anyone, she said. I didn't want to be part of something ugly. Her voice trembled for a moment. She wiped her hands on her jeans. Why did you come here? I asked. She looked down at the table. Because Jake promised me something, she said. He said he would leave Emily. He said he loved me. He said he'd tell her. He didn't. I thought he would choose me, and when he didn't, I wanted him to know what he had done. I wanted Emily to know the truth. The man by the door shifted. He looked like he might speak. Claire's fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. There was an urgency in her voice that made me sharp. Did you bring proof? I asked. She hesitated, then reached into her bag. Her hand came out with a small stack of printed messages and a photo. The messages were frank, private things that had been typed in a small blue box. The photo was of Jake and Claire at a coffee shop, sitting close, laughing. In the photo, Jake's hand rested near Claire's, like a promise. The sight of that hand made something cold crawl under my skin. I felt like an actor in a play who had forgotten their lines. Life had handed me the script of betrayal, and I was reading it out loud. My mind clicked through the evidence, the earring, the hotel receipt, the messages Claire handed me. Each piece fit like a small shard in a pattern I did not want to see. Why didn't you tell Emily? I asked, not looking at Jake because he was not in the room yet. The question tasted like iron. Claire's face turned white. I tried, she said. I sent her messages. I texted her from my number. I told her we had been seeing each other. She blocked me. I couldn't reach her. So I thought if I told her, if I told someone who cared about her, maybe she would hear it. She looked at me with hope, and I felt a strange thing, pity for Claire and anger at Jake all at once. People make mistakes. People hurt each other. But the way this had been wrapped in lies felt sharp and selfish. Why give me this? I asked. Because you're his mother, she said simply. Because maybe you'll do something. The man by the door finally spoke. His name, she said, was Mark. He was Claire's brother. He had driven her here to make sure she would not be alone. He said nothing else, only that he had seen enough and did not want to watch someone he cared for get hurt more. When they left, I stood on my porch and watched them go. Claire turned at the corner and glanced back at our house like she expected a miracle. Mark walked with a slow step as if the weight of the day had pressed down on him. The street swallowed them. I closed the door and felt the click like a verdict. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the messages spread like playing cards. I read them over and over. The words jumped like small, sharp fish. I felt like I had been given a map to a hidden place. The map was ugly. I thought of Emily sleeping in the room next door, breathing softly. I thought of Jake at work, answering emails, smiling thin smiles. I thought of love and how tricky it can be. I thought of my mother's hands and how steady they had been when I was small. In the days that followed, I walked in a strange fog. I visited under small pretexts and watched. When I saw Jake, he was easy and smooth again, as if the crisis had passed. He kissed Emily in the kitchen and said he loved her like a man who knew how to wrap words in safety. But when no one watched, he looked at his phone with a face I did not know, worried, small, ashamed. Emily began to recover from her cold. She laughed more and asked about new books at the library. She cooked dinners with more care. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to throw the messages on the table and watch the world change. But I did not. I had a rope pulled tight in my chest that taught me to wait. I needed more. I needed to know if Jake had told Emily. I needed to know if he had stopped. I needed to know if he had meant to leave her or if it had been a moment of weakness. I thought, again, of the old lesson. Kindness is brave. That meant I had to plan, not explode. So I made a new plan. I would gather more. I would not act like a judge throwing people into cold water. I would act like a gardener saving a plant from rot. I learned to watch the details, little text alerts, the way Jake tucked his phone in his pocket, the nights he came home late and smelled like perfume that did not belong to Emily. One afternoon, while Emily was at a yoga class, I cleaned out the small basket where Jake kept his keys and wallet. I told myself it was for dusting, for being helpful. The truth is, a mother knows when grief waits in small places. I slid my hand under the wallet and felt paper. I pulled out a receipt, another hotel. This one was closer, dated 2 nights earlier. My chest went cold. My hands had been steady before, but now they trembled. A few weeks of careful watching had turned into a river of proof. The earring had been a spark. The receipts were the kindling. I sat on the couch and let the room spin. I could not breathe for a second. Then I laughed, a short, dry thing that sounded like a bird getting caught on a wire. How foolish I had been to hope for an easy path. I wanted to tell Emily then. I wanted to be a thunderbolt and split the sky. But my plan was not revenge. I did not want to punish for the sake of hurting. I wanted truth and healing and a chance for repair if anyone deserved it. Also, part of me wanted to see how Jake would handle the weight of his choices when it came crashing down. That night the house felt heavy. The earring, the receipts, the messages, they lay on my table like small, dangerous seeds. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The streetlights blinked on like tired sentries. I thought of my mother and the way she used to press her palms together and whisper, "Courage is quiet." I decided to give Jake one last chance to come clean. I would not ambush him in the open or let Claire or Mark ruin their life without a chance for truth. The next morning, when I knew he would be home for a break between meetings, I would ask him again, gently, firmly, and listen. If he told the truth, we would see what mercy could do. If he lied, then the next day I would speak to Emily, no matter how much it hurt. I did not sleep that night. When dawn crept in, I fixed pancakes and waited. Jake came in with his jacket half on, hair messy, like a man running late. He kissed me on the cheek as if nothing heavy lay between us. "Mom," he said, "are you okay?" "Yes," I said. My voice was calm. My hands did not shake. "We need to talk." He looked at me with that small, guilty light in his eyes. He sat down. The room was small and quiet. The sun made a small bright circle on the table. This was the moment I had been preparing for, to give him one last chance to tell the whole story. I felt both mercy and steel in my heart. Before I could begin, the phone on the kitchen counter rang. It was Emily. She sounded worried. "Jake," she said, and then the line went quiet. He took the call and stood up, whispering something. Then, through the open window, I heard a sharp, sudden noise, the sound of a car stopping fast, of tires screaming. The kitchen light flickered. We all froze. Outside, there was a scream, not a small cry, but a long, raw sound that filled the whole block. I ran to the door and opened it. Down the street, a crowd had gathered. I could see Claire's figure at the center, but she was not alone. Mark was there, and beyond them, a man I did not know was on the ground. He was bleeding from his temple. People were shouting names like they were throwing stones. A woman was crying and pointing at the car that still smoked at the curb. My throat closed. The scene was sudden and terrible, like when a calm sea is split by a storm. I felt my heart lurch. I thought of the receipts, the messages, and the earring like pieces of a puzzle that suddenly made the picture of a crisis. I turned to Jake. His face was pale, and his hand trembled over the sink. He looked at me and then at the street. For a moment, he looked like a man who had been unmasked. He mouthed a name, Claire, and then the sirens began to wail in the distance. The next extreme thing had arrived without warning. The quiet plan I had made felt swept away by an urgent flood. My hands, which had been steady all this time, now shook. I could feel the ground under my feet tilt. The house that had been a shelter felt like a boat in a storm. And then, above the noise, Jake broke. He rushed outside, leaving his phone on the table, leaving the earring in the napkin, and ran toward the crowd like a man trying to catch a falling star. Jake ran like the world was ending. I ran after him even though my legs felt weak. The street was loud with voices, sirens, and fear. The air smelled like hot rubber and dust. People were gathered in a tight circle, blocking most of the view. All I could see were small flashes, a hand, a shoe, a face twisted with worry. "Move, please move," Jake shouted. The neighbors stepped aside when they saw him, their eyes wide with shock. Some of them knew Jake. Some of them knew Emily. None of them knew what had been happening in the shadows. When we got to the center, the scene hit me like ice water. Claire was kneeling on the ground, shaking hard. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her hands were pressed against the chest of a man lying on the pavement. He was breathing fast and shallow. His forehead was bleeding. I recognized him, Mark, her brother, the quiet one who had stood in my doorway like a guard. His shirt was torn where someone had tried to help him. Jake! Claire cried when she saw him. Her voice cracked. I swear I didn't see him step off the curb. The car. It was an accident, one of the neighbors said quickly. The driver tried to stop. But the driver was standing near his car, hands in his hair, pale and shaking. The front bumper had a small dent. Steam rose from under the hood. He kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He ran out. The ambulance siren grew louder. Jake knelt beside Claire, but he didn't touch her. It was the strangest thing. He leaned close like he wanted to comfort her, but his hands hovered in the air, trapped between guilt and fear. He looked at Mark and flinched. Then he whispered, this is my fault. I heard it. Claire heard it. And I knew then, truly knew, that something bigger than a mistake was unfolding. It wasn't just an affair or a small lie. There were consequences already spilling into the world. The paramedics arrived and pulled Mark onto a stretcher. His eyes fluttered open for half a second. He looked at Claire, then at Jake, and something heavy and unreadable passed between them. I couldn't tell if it was anger or regret or warning. They loaded him into the ambulance. Claire tried to climb in, but the paramedic stopped her. Only one family member, he said. I'm his sister, she cried. But before she could step in, the paramedic held up a hand. We need space to work. You can follow behind. Claire stumbled back, breathing in little gasps. Jake reached for her arm. She jerked away. Don't. Please don't touch me, she said. Her voice was thin, but her eyes were sharp with the pain of someone who wasn't expecting the world to collapse today. You said you would fix this, she whispered. You said you were handling everything. Jake swallowed. He looked down. Claire. No, she snapped. Mark got hit because he came to warn you. He came to tell you to stop lying. He came because he wanted to protect me. He didn't have to be involved in any of this. But he came for me. Because you couldn't tell the truth. Jake's eyes filled with tears. He didn't cry often. He hadn't cried since he was a kid. Seeing it now was like watching a dam break. Before he could answer, Claire turned and marched toward her car. She slammed the door, the sound echoing through the street. Then she drove off fast, following the ambulance. The crowd began to scatter. People whispered. Neighbors stared at Jake like they were trying to figure out what story they had just walked into. I put a hand on his back. Come inside, I said softly. He didn't argue. He walked with me like a man whose bones were suddenly too heavy. Inside the house, the silence was thick and tense. The earring on the table glinted like it was mocking us. The hotel receipts lay under it like buried snakes. Jake sat down on the couch. He covered his face with both hands. What am I going to do? He whispered. I sat across from him. For the first time since this all began, I felt the full weight of everything, the lies, the secrets, the heartbreak waiting for Emily, the broken trust, the chain reaction of pain that had already begun. You need to tell the truth, I said gently. He shook his head. I can't. Emily, she'll leave me. I know she will. She'll never forgive me. Mom. I messed up so bad. I wanted to tell him that he should have thought of that earlier. I wanted to tell him that pain spreads when people make selfish choices. But he was still my son, and my heart was still my heart. So I said the thing my mother would have said. Running from the truth only makes the truth run after you. He looked up at me with eyes swollen from crying. Mom, I didn't want to hurt anyone. I know, I said. But you did. The room held that truth quietly for a moment. I'll fix it, he whispered. I'll make it right. Just, please don't tell Emily yet. Please. Let me figure things out. I didn't answer right away. Because behind Jake's fear, behind his trembling hands, I felt something else growing, something I hadn't expected. A sharp, cold anger. Not loud anger. Not shouting anger. A quiet anger. A steady anger. The kind that grows from disappointment and heartbreak. The kind that whispers, this was preventable. The kind that says, someone innocent is about to get their world broken. That kind of anger. And it was growing inside me like a slow fire. But I didn't let him see it yet. Jake, I said, choosing each word like a careful step on a thin bridge, I can give you a little time. Not much. Just enough to decide how you will tell her. He wiped his eyes. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. I nodded. But inside me, something had already shifted. I was no longer just a mother trying to protect her son. I was now a witness, a guardian of the truth, and a woman who would not allow Emily to walk into a dark future blind. A soft knock sounded from the hallway doorway. I turned. Emily was standing there. She was dressed in her coat. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from a cold wind. She must have just come home. Karen, she said, confused. What's wrong? I heard shouting outside. The neighbors said something happened on the street. She looked at Jake. Her face softened with worry. Are you okay? Jake stiffened. He wiped his face quickly, pretending he wasn't crying. Yeah, just rough afternoon at work. It was a lie. A fast lie. A lie with no breath behind it. Emily walked toward him slowly, touched his cheek, and said with pure innocence, well, you have me. And that sentence broke something in me. Her kindness. Her loyalty. Her trust. She had no idea what Jake had done. She had no idea that he was sitting between two worlds, choosing which one to destroy. And for the first time since this began, I realized something terrifying. The truth was going to break her. No matter who said it. No matter how gentle the words were. But it still had to come out. Not yet. But soon. Emily looked at me then, smiling softly. Karen? Do you want tea? You look tired. I opened my mouth to answer. But before I could speak, my phone buzzed on the table. I reached for it and saw a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart dropped. It was a photo. A photo of Jake. With Claire. At the hotel. The date and time stamped in bold letters. Then a message followed. If he doesn't tell her, I will. The room went blurry around me. My breath stopped. And just as I lifted my eyes from the screen, Emily was walking toward me, smiling, completely unaware of the storm about to hit her life. The arms of betrayal, heartbreak, and revenge were closing in. And I knew. The next extreme event was coming for us all. Emily stepped closer, still smiling, still warm, still unaware of the knife-shaped truth floating in the air between all of us. Karen? Is everything okay? She asked. My throat tightened. Jake's face went white. My phone slipped slightly in my hand as another message came in. 24 hours. That was all it said. 24 hours until her world shattered. Or until I shattered it myself. I looked at Emily, sweet, loyal, gentle Emily, and I felt the weight of every lie sitting in my chest like a stone I could no longer carry. But I forced a small smile, because the truth could not fall here. Not yet. Not like this. I'm fine, I whispered. I'll tell you later. Emily nodded softly, unaware that her life had just been put on a countdown she didn't start. She turned toward the kitchen, humming quietly as she took off her coat. Jake stared at me, terrified, silently begging me to stay quiet. But the message on my phone glowed like a warning. 24 hours. The storm was coming. No one could stop it now. And as I watched Emily pour tea into a mug, laughing at something small on her phone, I knew. Tomorrow, someone's heart would break for real. And tonight, someone in this house would not sleep.